So hello, and thank you for this opportunity to present my research. I will talk about a part of an ongoing research project about Yemeni Jewish healing traditions on the crossroad between folk medicine and vernacular religion. So I would like to start with a short introduction. 2 years ago, in the course of an ethnographic survey, I met an amulet writer, Bal Hifas or Sahib Kitab. We'll call him here today Rabbi Yitzhak, it's not his real name, whose family originated from the city of Aden. We met at his yeshiva, located in a small neighborhood in the center of Israel. I wanted to meet Rabbi Yitzhak since I heard he is known to practice amulet writing, healing, and expelling demons. Indeed, in the short time I was there, I saw him sitting in front of a large printed Yemeni amulet guidebook, Hifas. When I told Rabbi Yitzhak I am studying Yemeni healing methods, he said that all of these traditions were documented in one book, but unfortunately he could not remember its name. Shortly afterwards, yes, thank you very much. Shortly afterwards, I was hinted gently that I should leave. Disappointed, I went home, only to receive a friendly phone call from Rabbi Yitzhak the next day, in which he said he was busy yesterday because he had to cure a demon-possessed girl. Additionally, he happily stated, I now remember the book's name. The book is called Nachalat Yosef. There you will find everything you are looking for. So, I became familiar with the Adeni Jewish scholar Shmuel ben Yosef Yeshua, that we heard about it now from Dr. Malachi, and his book Nachalat Yosef. And we just heard about this book quite a lot, so I will not present it now. I will just say that thanks to Dr. Doron Yaakov and the members of the research workshop on Jewish spiritual creation in Yemen, led by Dr. Menashe Anzi, I learned that Nachalat Yosef contained many references to traditional medicine practices known to the author from his community in colonial Aden. And after reading the book, I found it was surprising that Rabbi Yitzhak referred to the book as a source of learning traditional healing methods. This is because in his book, Rabbi Shmuel created definitions between legitimate and illegitimate kinds of medicine. Addressing these definitions today obligates us to first ask what lies at their base, since the use of the term folk medicine often represents a body of belief and practice unaffected by modern knowledge, yes, apparently, with which it is frequently compared on the apparent presumption that folk and the modern are mutually exclusive classifications. Or in other words, in order to put the folk in folk medicine, one must hold a view of a particular folk, believing and practicing a medical system that, in light of the cultural evolution concept of the 19th century, is relegated to a position low on the hierarchy of knowledge. So, keeping that in mind, it was just a short theoretical thought. Keeping that in mind, in this lecture I want to place Shmuel ben Yosef in an array of 19th century native and foreign scholars whose writings contained an ethnographic gaze on folk knowledge from Jewish communities in Yemen and in other Muslim lands. I will address the framing of healing traditions in Nachalat Yosef and discuss its identification with two main populations, Adeni women and Yemeni immigrants to Aden. So after this introduction, I will start. Rabbi Shmuel defined three kinds of medicine. Natural one, meaning the one based on knowledge of the natural world, in which he included parts of folk medicine, such as medicinal plants, also found in his book, as well as modern medical practices. The second kind, the medicine that's above the natural world, practiced by true prophets, and is no longer to be found these days. Finally, the third kind, Rabbi Shmuel named segulot, a Hebrew word often used as a synonym to practical Kabbalah. Both historically were used to state the use of holy names for various purposes, and contrasting the negative Hebrew word for kishuf, sorcery, witchcraft, or sihr in Arabic. And Rabbi Shmuel acknowledged the effectiveness of segulot, and yet he refrained the use of this kind of medicine, and I quote his words: "Only if it does not stand against reason, or against the Holy Torah, or against the saying of the old sages. Amulets and spells are included in this kind, but only if they are written by a God-fearing wise man, and not by witch doctors. If it stands against reason, then I say it is not segula, it is madness." End of quote. We learned that Rabbi Shmuel did not rule out means of healing that were in correlation with what he defined as reason. He confirms the effectiveness of amulets written by learned and holy religious men, and does not question, at least in principle, the use of holy names for that purpose. It seems that he particularly scorned practices addressing demons in order to obtain knowledge or power. He brings many evidence from the Jewish sources objecting demonology. Yet, that is not to say that Rabbi Shmuel questioned the actual existence of demons, as his views were well rooted in both Jewish and Muslim Yemeni cosmology. He depicted the nature of demons and specified their different kinds in correlation to what can be found in Yemeni Jewish books, dividing the demons by their elemental source, fire, air, earth, or by their dwelling places, domestic, woodlands, water sources, and more. Furthermore, he reflected the blurred borders between good and evil demons, attributing a religious identity to righteous demons, including demons that learn the Torah and pray in synagogues. His criticism was addressed towards practices he identified as relics of paganism, such as burning fragrant plants, or the ceremonial slaughtering of animals as offering to appease the demons. And he locates these illegitimate kinds of practices in two main groups, as I said. The first, and the one closer to him, are the women of his community. He devotes several places in the book to prove why certain customs held by Jewish women are mistaken, and describes his attempts to unroot these practices. He recalls an argument with an old midwife who responded to his critics in these words. She said, "Beware that you do not upset the demons in your words, for they protect us." And he continues and say how he laments that all of his actions were not successful in preventing these customs. As it is often the case, magic is often regarded as originating from the other, not from us, the other person, or the foreign one, who holds power to protect or to harm us, as Esther Mujabsky showed regarding her studies on children clothing. So, in the case of Rabbi Shmuel, who wrote about wrong customs, as he said, wrong customs that are without reason held by healing women, which they learned from their Arab neighbors. Yeah, so he tried to attribute these customs to the Muslim population, claiming the Jewish midwives and other women learned these practices from the Muslims. And this allows him to say something about what is truly Jewish. So, for example, breaking eggs in front of the bride and the groom against the evil eye, that's not a Jewish, in his view, not Jewish at all. It allows him to create a gap between what he sees as a truly Jewish identity and what is a foreign custom. To what extent Jewish and Muslim customs maintain mutual elements and influences goes beyond my lecture today, but it's worth mentioning that this identification of magic with the other worked both ways, and that, as Batzion Iraqi Klorman had showed, for Muslim population in tribal Yemen, the Jewish amulet writers had an important social role. Yet, Rabbi Shmuel's critical approach towards women practice customs went beyond traditions that were related to demons, as he harshly criticized the traditional way of wrapping babies. Yagammatu al iyal, yeah, you know, this harsh wrapping of the child, claiming Yagammatu, we will say, claiming this tight wrapping harms the child and describing it as a cruel custom, and wonders how women can be so cruel to their newborn children. Yet, in Yemeni folklore, the wrapping was said to protect the child and was a symbol of motherly love, as one can see in the famous folk song, for example, Wanafida Lumi, I assume that you know it. So it goes, Wanafida Lumi di bananatni, and then, Uma shatat ga'adi, waqamatatni. The Rabbi Shmuel criticism correlates with broader discourse in the encounter of modern Western medicine with traditional practices, especially the negotiation of gender power relations regarding child care and towards midwives. A similar discourse is found in the writing, 5 minutes? In the writing of the writer and publisher Shlomo Bechor Hotzen, mentioned here today, also active in the 19th century, who wrote against women's folk customs of his community in Baghdad as an obstacle in the way of modernization. Rabbi Shmuel, living in colonial Aden, wrote against the traditional baby wrapping because he obviously knew other ways of childcare, and more importantly, knew about the modern medical criticism towards this custom. So in short, the second place where Rabbi Shmuel identifies the illegitimate kind of medicine is the Yemeni Jewish immigrants to his city. In fact, the book contains several substantial narratives that scorn the mischief, the greed, and the senselessness, as he says, of Jewish healers from Yemen, and to Rabbi Shmuel's actions to expose their true nature, as he says. And I will read a short passage. It's a story. His daughter, Rabbi Shmuel's daughter, could not bear children, and her family took her to a Yemeni healer, and he asked for a lot of money for his treatment. So Rabbi Shmuel writes, I quote, "And then he sat and wrote what he wrote, and placed the note in water. After some time, he took it out and handed it to us to read it. And it was written there that we should take several spices and medicines for her to drink, to bathe, to smoke. So we said, good, it is natural medicine. But then this healer fell in his own words. He said, I did not write these writings. We said, but we saw that you wrote it. He said, no, all I wrote were incantations. So we asked him, so who wrote this? He said, the angels wrote it. And know that I will not enjoy the money you gave me, for most of it is an appeasement for the demons. And I will cut it short. In the end, Rabbi Shmuel fights this man and forces him to write a document saying everything I do is false, and this man really has a hard time. Just how much? Okay, conclusion. So, just a moment. Okay. Okay. Sorry. With adapting a Western gaze on folk knowledge, shaping how Rabbi Shmuel imagined the folk, it's possible Rabbi Shmuel would find a common language with other parallel figures like him, not in Yemen, but in other port cities in the region. For example, David Sassoon, who was located in Bombay, the famous Sassoon family. I don't have time right now to talk about it, unfortunately. But as a last note, and coming back to Rabbi Yitzchak, the amulet writer I mentioned in the beginning of my talk, that told me to read Nachalat Yosef, and after learning Rabbi Shmuel's views and actions against demons and against Yemeni healing methods, I can't help but wonder how would an imaginative meeting between Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Yitzchak would look like today, because I can imagine he would not be so happy for his younger community member. But that's for another time maybe, so thank you.
Thank you very much, John. I just want to add one